Hi everybody, Cheryl Hentz here, and welcome to another edition of On Oshkosh. I'm really happy tonight. I'm usually happy, but I'm really happy tonight because someone who has worked in journalism for many, many years is here. He has written a book, and we're going to talk about the book, and we're going to talk about his years as a reporter at WBAY, and this is a real treat for me. Would you please welcome everybody, Jerry Burke, to the show. He, I think the only station you were ever with was WBAY, wasn't
Television,
it?
yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, WBAY-TV 2 out of Green Bay, and you retired in what year? 2007. And you started there in 73.
Yep.
So it was a long time.
Yep.
A lot of happy memories and some sad things, and we're gonna cover the gamut here tonight. But this is his book, and I think we've got a picture of it that we can bring up on the screen. He has written That Doesn't Happen Here Until It Did, plus takeoffs, a clever title there, plus takeoffs of Jerry's 50-plus years covering and volunteering for EAA's Air Venture, which just ended as a few days ago as we taped this on August 4th. So, thank you so much for being here.
I'm flattered to be here. Thank you.
Did you write this year?
Started in January.
And here we are.
And the reason it started in January is that my bride, Mary, put her foot down last year. When I first retired, Cheryl, a lot of people said to me, and I refer to this in the book, you should write a book. And my standard pat answer was, yeah, right. Who's going to read it? Me? You know. And so I said, and then I was volunteering this and that. I was on multiple different boards, and enjoyed doing it. And then last year, Mary, she put her foot down and she said, "It's time for you to say no, because I have a tough time with that word when I'm asked to do something." And so I put, as of the end of the year, I'm severed all ties with different organizations I was with. That's awful rough sounding. Let's say I just stopped doing it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And got to be January, and I don't remember exactly what it was. I was sitting at the computer one day, and I went, you know what, maybe I should try and take a stab at writing that book. Still don't know if anybody will read the damn thing, but let's take a swing at it. So I started to write, and I wasn't sure where I wanted to start. And I went, start at the beginning, Dad. That's where you're supposed to.
Yeah.
And my grandmother's advice came back and worked with me. And she always, she said, anything you're going to do, you give it your best shot. And if it doesn't work out, you tried.
Yes.
So anyway,
yeah.
I'm sitting at the computer one day, and I said, all right, where am I going to start? And I went, yeah, I know where I'm going to start. It's going to be the first big story I ever covered. And that was the Lisa French case in Fond du Lac,
yeah.
Halloween killer.
Yep,
and,
it sure was.
And to be real honest about it, Cheryl, when I started to write it, my main concern, and I said to Mary, my wife, I said, I'm worried I'm not going to be able to remember some of these things because, well, Lisa, that's 50 years.
Yeah.
Or 49 if you want to be picky about it. And I went, how much am I going to remember? Well, I found once I started to write, everything started to come back.
Yeah.
There were a couple of stories I wrote in the book. I needed to tap some shoulders and say, hey, help me remember here. What am I forgetting? One of my very best contacts over the year was Ed Shepard from the Fond du Lac County Sheriff's Department. I worked it sounds like I'm a detective. I worked with Ed
in a way, as reporters, we are.
Yeah.
You know.
He was on the Ronnie Eichstadt one. That was the first David Spanbauer.
Yeah.
He had Bobby Joe Fritz in Campbell Sport in '83, and a couple of other cases that Ed was involved with. And he was a really good shoulder to lean on. And I had to lean on him on a couple of things with the Bobby Joe case. And then with Ronnie, I remembered that one like it was yesterday. The Spanbauer one is just burned into my brain.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we never had a serial killer in the Fox Valley or Northeast Wisconsin ever before. I talked with different people who were history buffs, and I said, when did we ever have a serial killer in our neck of the woods before? And one guy said, he says, nope, you got our first one there. That was the first one. He went back, there was one in the 1850s, but it was a family thing, so technically not serial killer.
Yeah.
So Spanbauer broke the mold, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. So you started in January, and how long did it take you then? When did you actually
5
finish?
months.
Okay. Well, that's not too bad.
No.
I have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I find it to be a very easy read.
It's a very quick read,
Yeah.
and it's an easy read.
Yeah, it's 100 and some.
Just about 103.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Yeah.
100 pages.
And yeah, I mean, and it's just fast. I mean, once you get going, you don't want to stop.
Thank you.
It's really a
several
good
people
book.
have said that to me, and which I'm flattered to hear. I heard from a young lady today that is a good friend of Mary and mine. I hadn't talked to her maybe in 5-10 years. Her dad ran Richard's School of Dance here for years, Patty Verhoeven.
Oh, sure.
And Patty sent me a very nice message saying, what a wonderful book. And I went, boy, coming from you, Patty, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people said, why didn't you write more? That's with regard to the stories that I wrote about. And then other people said, why didn't you write more about EAA? And I went, okay, the reason I didn't do more on the stories I covered is the ones that I wrote are the ones that had a deep personal impact on me. Mm-hmm. And then as I'm writing it, and Mary looked at it, she says, that impacted a lot of people. And I went, you know what, you're right. It impacted the Fox Valley, northeast Wisconsin.
That's right.
Spanbauer had a profound impact.
Oh, yeah.
Look what Gerald Turner did with Halloween in this.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I want to talk about. I mean, from all of these different things, something, I guess, good, if you can say that, came from it. Things changed. Parents became more protective of their kids. And I want to talk about a few of the stories. I want to save some, though, so people, buy the book. And even if we talk about these stories, please buy the book. Like I said, it's an easy read. It's something that you can do in one sitting, really. And it's reasonably priced. You can get the paperback version for $5.99. I also bought the Kindle version for $1.99. I mean, come on, you cannot beat those prices. I don't care where you try and go. So I really hope that you buy the book. Jerry's done a phenomenal job. So you picked the stories that had an impact on you, and undoubtedly a lot of other people.
Well, the more I wrote, the more I'm going, you know what, this story didn't affect just me. This affected others. Amy Breyer and Townham and Ash and Fox Crossing. That's when parents started not leaving the bedroom windows open at night during the summer.
Yep.
That case started the phenomena. And
Yep.
then Spanbauer, that ended up with locking the bedroom windows, even in the hot summer nights.
Oh, yeah. Leave the air conditioning on.
Yeah.
So what made you want to go into broadcast journalism?
It was an accident.
It was an accident.
It was pretty much an accident. I got out of the Air Force in '67.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. And I started working at WMKC. It doesn't exist anymore. There was a Miles Kimball station.
Yep, Miles Kimball Company.
Yeah, it was an FM station. And if you think back, those of us that are old enough, FM was not a very popular broadcast band in the late 60s,
No,
early 70s.
it wasn't. Mm-mm.
And I was the nighttime DJ from 6 to midnight every night. And we were going through news directors like turning on a faucet and turning it off. At least once a month we were firing we had Fire Friday. That's what it was called. And one Friday I said to the general manager, I says, I think I want to take a swing at being news director. He says, you ought to be the next Fire Friday person, don't you? And I went, well, you know what, let me take a swing at it. I says, just if I don't work out, put me back on the nighttime. Well, I attacked it, and I attacked it with vengeance. The hours were asinine. I was working, I started 4 in the morning, and a lot of nights because I was covering meetings, I wouldn't get home till 11. Well, I was single back then, so that didn't bother me.
Yeah.
And then in 1972, WMKC was named Station of the Year by the Associated Press First time ever an FM station got that honor.
Wow.
And I know the two other stations here in town, WOSH and back then was WAGO. They were AM stations, and they took note of what I was doing. They went, "Oh, who's this FM yo-yo? What's he doing? He's giving us a run for our buck."
Yep.
And so then we got that award, and then in February of '73, it was a little before that. It was probably January. I was notified by both Channel 5 and Channel 2 the same day, within an hour of each other,
Oh, wow.
saying we'd like to hire you.
Holy cow.
And
This was unsolicited.
unsolicited. I never asked him. So I went to Channel 2 a couple days later in the morning at 9, and 11 o'clock I had an interview at Channel 5. And both interviews went very well. And then I came back to my scholarly grandmother. I said, "Nana, what should I do?" And so she sat me down. We had a long talk. And she says, "Who do you like best?" Blah, blah, blah. And I took 2 because I grew up with Channel 2.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first station in Northeast Wisconsin, television station. Bobby Nelson was my hero,
Yes.
Uncle
Yes.
Bobby. And when I started at 2, Bobby was probably the best mentor a person could ask for. He just was an incredibly wonderful man. He had a great sense of humor. He just made me feel at home.
Mm-hmm.
And you couldn't ask for better.
Right. Yeah.
So there I stayed, and then and that was in '73, and then in 1977 we started the Fox Valley Bureau, which was here in Oshkosh initially, and in 1990 we moved the office to Appleton. So that's kind of how it all started. Our first broadcast in the Fox Valley Bureau was Halloween night, 1977. Trick or treat.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we talk a little bit about some of these stories that are in the book, Jerry, what was it that you were doing at WMKC that gave these long time, especially WOSH? I mean, I was news director there, not once but twice. I left, and then I think I was gone maybe a year or so, and Jeff Schmidt was then general manager, and he saw me. I was participating in the Little Oshkosh community build project. Of course, that's torn down now, but he saw me there, and he said, "Are you coming? What can I do to make you come back?" And I said, "I don't know. We're going to have to talk." So we had to talk, and then I went back for a second time. But what were you doing that made you give these 2 stations a run for the money?
I was going to every meeting. I was relentless. Was I tired? Oh God, yes. But I just went, and I think I was maybe 3-4 months in, and the general manager at MKC, Bill Shaw, said, "Are you burning the candle on both ends?" And I said, "To get the fire going, yes." I says, "We've got to do something here." And I just refused to give up. I nurtured, this where we are here recording this. This is the old police station.
It is
in Oshkosh.
This little wing right
I
here.
used to come in that door every morning at 4:30.
Yeah.
And a lot of memories.
Yeah.
And I developed very special relationships with a lot of the officers.
And
Boy,
you have to,
Oh,
because
yeah.
even if they tell you something off the record, that's
Yep.
still better than not having it at all.
A lot of the guys were very good at helping
Yeah.
me. And they learned to trust me. When I first started, they went, "Hey, friggin' reporter, get out of here." But after a while, the trust started to build, and I won't go into all the names, but they're all retired now. But got to develop some friendships with those guys, and then eventually some of the ladies. Then I had established a real good relationship with the fire department and with the sheriff's department, which was just up the street. So that was key. And then I was working with the city councils, the county boards, school boards, and I got a good reputation. I'm very proud of that. And that helps, because when you get a good reputation and a trusting factor built in, you learn things that other people are not being told. And I carried that through my career. I just learned, again, thank you, my grandma. And my Nana was my my mentor, so to speak. She was a wonderful woman.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree. Being honest and forthright and, keeping your word as your bond.
Yep.
When someone says, I'm telling you this off the record, as much of a scoop as that might be, you got to honor that.
Well,
and that's how you get a reputation, and that's how you get to make those connections.
A lot of the officers over the years, and it wasn't just here in Oshkosh, it was Appleton, Neenah, Menasha, up and down the valley, Fond du Lac all the way to Kaukauna. A lot of times officers, detectives, and so on would offer me a lead. They wouldn't give me the direct information, but they'd offer a lead, and it was up to me to go dig that up. And you wouldn't believe how many times it paid off. It was invaluable.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I watched some of the reporters today, and here I sound like an old fogey now, old school fogey. And I look at them, they're looking at their phone, counting on Twitter to give them information. I want to slap them upside the head.
I know. If you have to refer to it to get some facts or figures, that's one thing. But I know that's one of my questions later on is, we might as well talk about it now, is, how do you feel about some of the reporters today? Because some of the stuff that they do drives me nuts.
Oh, you should. I've even got Mary doing it now to the TV. I start screaming. I just scream at the TV. Where are you?
Yeah.
I got to be careful here.
Well, one of the things that bothers me, and it's a little trivial thing, but it bothers me because it's one of those filler words.
Yeah.
They'll be talking about something, and then they'll say, now he said blah blah. They use that word now, and I'm like, why are you using that word? That's stupid. There's no reason. If you're going to use words, they should count. It's a transition word. It's a filler word, and they rely on it as a crutch. And that's just one of those little things that bothers me.
Grammar drives me bonkers.
What does?
Grammar.
Oh.
Improper grammar.
Yeah.
For example, in fact, it happened yesterday, not just on local news, but on the network news. The word none. None is a collective noun. None is a derivative of no one.
Yes.
When you use that word, it's not a plural verb, it's a singular. None was. It's never none were. When I taught at the college for 8 years, and I told the students, I says, any of you ever use the wrong verb, I says, I will come back, change your grade, and flunk you. I drilled some of these things into them. And I won't use her name, but one of my former students, she lives in Madison, and she works in broadcasting down there, and she teases me about it all. She says, when I'm writing the story, she says, I still remember your lecture on that one. So it worked.
Yeah. Well, it's the same way in reverse when they're talking about, say they want to use the word family members, or whatever.
Pardon me.
That's you can't say.
You can't. One word.
Yeah, is one word, and it just, I don't know. Some of this stuff just drives me crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
I've got Mary doing the same thing now. She's got better at yelling at the TV than me.
Well, you mention things to people, and they say, "Geez, I never noticed that before," and so then they start looking for it.
Yeah.
But if there's anything that drives me crazy besides the constant looking at the phone, almost as if they're reading a script off there. They don't have a prompter necessarily when they're out in the field, so that's their prompter. They've probably got the whole story written out.
Well, I don't have a problem using that as a
guide.
Yeah,
but you shouldn't be sitting there reading the whole thing.
Because it's better than me holding a bunch of papers.
Yeah.
But it's still.
But remember that when that was the case, news anchors would sit there and they'd be reading their stories.
Yeah.
Well,
that was pre-teleprompter.
Yeah. One of my jobs, I was this was when I was in West Texas, and I was producing news at, it was a CBS affiliate there. One of my jobs as the producer was to, type up the scripts, of course, but then tape them down on the teleprompter, which then, I'm sure remember it, it was a conveyor belt type thing. And, you'd have to tape them in a row, and then you'd have to tape them down, and they'd be laying on the floor. The whole show would be taped out, and you'd have to crank it to move it. and you'd have to go in, in the same pattern and the same speed that someone's talking. Well, one anchor may talk faster than the
other, yeah.
co-anchor, and it was something. And I don't know. Then it finally got to a point where they were controlling their own prompter with a little thing on the floor with their foot. So, but those were some of the good old days, I think.
Well, we can call them good old days.
I mean, I think that a lot of the things today to collect news and to broadcast news, I think that's all great. But you don't hear too many people these days talking about their stories and their experiences quite the way we have over the years,
Yeah, well,
maybe someday they'll have, because things are going to continue to advance. So someday, when they're as old as us, and you're older than me, but they're going to...
Nothing's older than me, except dirt, and there's question marks on that one. So.
Well, let's talk about some of these stories, and we may as well start with the very first one in the book, and that is the Halloween killer, Gerald Turner. Tell folks who maybe aren't from this area or who need to have a refresher on it, really what happened with that.
Well,
with
Lisa French, she was went trick-or-treating Halloween night, 1973, and never came home.
Yep.
And they found her body, a farmer found her body just east of Fond du Lac, out near Tate Cheat, right near St. Mary Springs. If you're ever down by Fond du Lac, you go up by St. Mary Springs. That area is all built up now, but there was a farm out there, and her body was found 4 days later, and her body was in one bag, and her clothing was in another. And Mel Heller was chief of police at that time. I had just met the gentleman. Mel was I would call him an old school cop. And he put his hands on his hip that day. I remember that so vividly. And he said, Jerry, he says, I don't think this is going to end well. Well, that was like the day after she disappeared. And then the fourth day when they found her, I got out there maybe a couple hours after they had discovered her body. They didn't move it at first. Crime lab came up, blah, blah, blah. And I happened to see the chief out there, and I says, you got any suspects? He says, well, I got one, but he says, I got to be careful on this one. So they were sensitive. They knew, they focused on Turner almost immediately, but he proved to be a tough case to crack. And it was not until several months later when they got the hair samples came, because DNA wasn't around.
That's right. It was not a thing.
And so when they got the hair samples back from the crime lab, that was, I want to say, May or June of the following year, 7-8 months, it was him. And they brought him in. He eventually confessed and was sentenced, I want to say 38 years, was that right?
Yes, and convicted of second-degree intentional
assault,
homicide and
sexual assault.
Yep, and he was sentenced to 38 years in prison.
Yep.
And he was let out
92.
17 years later.
And boy, did the you-know-what hit the fan.
It sure did. Because, and that's what, it's funny because he was let out, released early for good behavior. Really?
Well,
this is someone who has good behavior, but I mean, he ended up back in the slammer.
Yep.
He did, but he is still making news.
Well, he will till the day he dies.
Yeah, I mean,
there's enough reporters of my vintage and a little after me. I'm sorry, that will not let that story die until he does.
Yeah,
I say that in the book. In fact. When he was in '92, when he was brought back, I mean, everybody was just in utter shock that how dare they let this SOB out. Mm-hmm. And when he was in and out of court, trying to remember, was it Judge Weinke that handled that case? I think it was. Anyway, one of the judges, every time he was brought into the courtroom, he would just sneer at those that were in the courtroom, audience, media, so on. And finally, I think it was in 2002, they found him in possession of child porn, and that ended any chance of parole.
Yep.
They put him in a couple of halfway houses, but he still ends up back in the slammer. Pardon my blunt language. But,
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
I'm sorry, but that's where he belongs.
Well, exactly. Now, I know at one point, and I don't think he still is, but at one point, he was in a halfway house, and I think you just referenced that. But also, you see, I had this all laid out at home.
I've screwed up your mortar.
No. What happened was I started printing this at home, and my printer ran out of ink,
Oh, geez.
so I had to send it over here to have them print it, and it printed differently than how I was looking at it at home. So, yes, in February 1st of 2018, that was his mandatory release date from Racine Correctional Institution, and he was released into the custody of the Department of Health Services here in the state.
I don't know where he is. I don't want to know where he is.
Yeah, at one point he was being held in a secure, that's what they say, state-run mental health facility in Mauston, Wisconsin.
Yep.
But of course, Lisa French's mother, and I mean, she started a petition. At one time she had over 25,000 signatures. To keep him behind bars. He should never see the light of day again.
No, he shouldn't. I agree.
And just an awful, awful man. And the things that he did to that poor little girl.
Well, look, it's still, we're 50 years past, and we still don't have trick-or-treating after dusk in the
That's right.
state. Nowhere in the state of Wisconsin.
That's right.
Is that allowed?
Yep.
I shouldn't
And-
say isn't allowed. They don't do it.
Right.
And, we get a lot of trick-or-treaters at our house every year, and they always, if I see a kid out there with a child without a parent or a guardian, I say, where's your guardian, or where's your mom or dad? Because they should be with somebody. I've never forgotten that, and I don't want.
Yeah.
When our son was young.
And I think most parents do. They either have their kids go in a group, or they are accompanied by one parent, or maybe an older brother or sister, maybe a babysitter, somebody. They're accompanied by somebody who's older and can see through some of these charades.
And see, that's the reason I took that story first. One, because it was my first major story, and second was because it impacted everybody.
Yeah.
Anybody that has children that does trick-or-treating, you were affected by it.
Yeah. So how did it change how you and Mary, because you've just got one son, right?
When he was born in '83.
Okay.
Yeah, I was late in getting married. I was too busy with my career. But, no. When Christopher was born, we always closed the bedroom windows in the summer. We just kept the air on, that's all.
Yeah.
Too many memories. I didn't want it to happen to me, or us, I should say.
Yeah.
We were protective, not overly protective, but we took more precautions. And we had one friend of ours, I won't say their names, they said, why do you do, I says, and I told them about the French case. Oh, they hadn't thought about it in that manner. Well, think about it. It's your child.
Yeah, it's interesting when we either cover things or something personally happens to us. It's like some of my friends say, God, Cheryl, you're always preparing for the worst, like when it comes to bad weather. Well, when I was 17 years old, our house, April of '74, that tornado.
Yep, 9th Avenue.
Yep, well, and it cut a swath through the west side, and
right.
our house was one that got hit by it. And, so you take things like that seriously.
Yep.
And if they say, seek shelter now, you better believe I'm seeking shelter. I'm taking my dogs, and we are seeking shelter right then and there.
Amen.
And if others don't want to do that, well, that's fine. But, when you experience a tornado firsthand, then that puts you in a different mindset.
Absolutely.
There was another couple of stories here that I wanted to touch on a little bit here. In '74, 2 kids disappeared.
Oh, yeah.
And this is, they were 3 and 4.
Yep.
and they disappeared, but it wasn't because someone abducted them.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Shanna Steffen and Ryan Reward. October 23rd. I remember the date.
26th,
26th was
Yep.
it? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
but same difference.
They vanished, and the APB went out on the. It sounds APB. They put out a bulletin, missing children, West Side. It was like one street off of Lombardi. It was on Shadow Lane. I put in the book. It's in the shadow of Lambeau Field. Exactly, and what it is. So that was at 1:30 in the afternoon that the bulletin was put out. I wrote the information down. It's not uncommon to hear something like this almost daily about some kids just disappeared, vanished. They're missing. So I wrote
Same
that.
thing with silver alerts these
Yeah,
days.
Yep. Oh yeah. And so I wrote it down, pushed it off to the side of my desk. I was producing that day. Got to be 5:30, and I was sorting the scripts out, and I gave Chuck his copy, Chuck Ramsey, and I gave everybody else their copy. And I looked, and I went, "Oh yeah, I got to check on these kids." So I called over to the Green Bay PD, and the captain that I got on the phone, I wish I could remember his name. He reminded me of Kojak, Telly Savalas. Anyway, he said, "Jerry," he says, "we are very worried." I went, "Oh boy." And he says, "We got a big search going on in that area." I said, "Okay, good, thank you for whatever." So I called our on-call photographer, and Gary Nelson happened to live just on the other side of the Mason Street Bridge. And when that bridge goes up, you think it's bad here in Oshkosh for the boats that go through. When you get a ship coming through, you're tied up for a half hour. So anyway, I called, and June answered the phone, Gary's wife, and she sent Gary over right away. Got to be 6 o'clock, and he's still not there. I'm going, where the hell is he? And I looked out the window. I went, oh, the bridge is up. So anyway, Gary gets there. We shot over to Shadow Lane. We're downtown Green Bay, okay? We went out by Lambeau's, if you can kind of picture that. We got there, and it was obvious the search was still on. We pulled up in front of this house. I had no clue whose house it was at that moment, but I saw this couple sitting there, and I went, they look like they're involved. And just something told me. And I went up and introduced myself, and it was the parents of Ryan Reward. And I very timidly said, could I do an interview with you about what's going on? And Mr. Reward said, sure. And I went, okay, good. So Gary, we're doing the interview. I'm kneeling down now, and they're on the front step, sitting there. And we started the interview, and about 20 seconds in, all of a sudden we hear from around the corner of the house, we found him. And I went, oh, good news. We got up, went around to the side of the house, and it became bad news.
Yeah.
Two men are carrying one each child, and they're both limp, and they're doing mouth to mouth, and they were running to the rescue squad that happened to be right by the curb. And I just went, and at that time, one of the fathers, I won't say who, charged the other father, and they got into a push-pull contest. Anger, frustration.
Yeah.
And Gary's rolling through this whole thing. Tim Blaney of the corner happened to be on scene, and he was coming up the street, and I said, Tim went into the rescue squad, came back out, and I said, what does it look like? He says, it doesn't look good. I went, geez. And just by this time now, and when the fathers were going at each other, an officer came and separated them. One officer took Mr. Steffens, moved him over here. Another one took Mr. Reward, moved him over yonder. And so the rescue squad took off, sirens blaring. Gary and I went back to the car, sat down, and we just sat there, and we were just in utter shock of what we had witnessed. We just went, oh my God, what did we just see? So we went back to the station. That was when we were still using film. Called Bob Eckberg was our processor that weekend. Bob processed the film, and while he was processing the film, I got a call from Tim Blaney, the coroner. He said, we lost the kids. I went, geez. So I started to write the story, and I told Gary, I says, let's not use the bit where the fathers confront each other. I said, I don't want it. They're going through enough crap right now.
Yeah.
We don't want to take advantage of this. So I wrote the story. Chuck came up to me and he says, Jerry, I want you on set with me. And I went, oh, God. I said, I don't know if I can handle this. He says, you'll be fine. I wasn't. I started to read the
It's
story.
tough.
I started to read that story at 10 o'clock. I maybe got 4 or 5 sentences in, and I just lost it. It was I was an emotional wreck. And so after the story was done, Chuck put his arm around me, gave me a big hug, and he says, "Good job." And we went to commercial. And I went upstairs. And the following Monday, one of the radio stations in town, they had a morning talk show, just ripped me a new one. I sensationalized.
For breaking down?
No, just
Or-
because of the way I did the story.
Oh.
I took advantage of the family. I did not take advantage of them. I reported what as best I could, kept the fight out of it.
Yeah.
And he just, but anyway, Warren Gers was the media critic for the Green Bay Press Gazette. Warren wrote up a wonderful article saying how considerate I was, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't looking, I didn't talk to Warren. He did this on his own.
On his own, yeah.
And the radio station guy, he didn't ask me anything. He just went on a whatever tangent.
Yeah.
And so I felt like a piece of crap for a while. And but about 3 weeks after the story aired, we got a call from the station. Got a call from Dr. Irving Fang, a journalism professor at the University of Minnesota. He had seen a copy of the story. He wanted to know if he could use and put the story in a textbook that he was writing. And I went, "Wow!" I said, "I'm okay with it." I said, "But I don't have the call on that. That's station property." So I put him in touch with the news director, and he said, "Sure, go ahead." And he wrote up it was a very complimentary story a chapter that he put in that book. And then the following year, I was put up, I shouldn't say, the station was put up for an award for what we did with that story. I accepted it, but as I told a book club group that I met earlier today, I am one of the, and my grandmother's the one that the way I am this way. When I'm getting an award for somebody's tragedy, I'm very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I do not like to be honored for somebody who lost a child or whomever. Yeah. That's just not my DNA.
Yeah.
I did my job. That's what I had to do.
Yeah.
But on top of that, then Cheryl, within the next 2 years, I must have, without exaggeration, I must have done over 100 presentations about that story. And I always included the on-air tape that ran that night at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And every time, without fail, I would run that video, and when the video ended, I didn't say anything for maybe 20, 30 seconds. You could hear a pin drop. Because
and we should tell folks how the children had died.
Well, they were, yeah, oh God. Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? They were, back then in the late 60s, early 70s, today we have a washer and we have a dryer. Back then they made combination washer dryers. And those combination units were fairly large. And on the front door, there was a door that swung shut and it had a latch on it. And when it closed, it latched.
Yeah.
3- and 4-year-old crawled in, good hiding place. And the door latched and they were stuck in there. So that's when the search began. Back up a little bit. Thank you for bringing this up.
Sure.
The family closed the garage door right away. Never thought of looking in the washer-dryer combo. So we're going 5 hours now. People are looking all over the neighborhood, checking everywhere, can't find them. 6 o'clock, these two gentlemen duck hunting had just opened. These two hunters show up, and the first place they did is they went and opened the garage door. The first place they looked was that washer-dryer. They found them right away.
What made them, do you know?
Instinct.
Really?
They're dads.
Okay, yeah.
And after all the dust settled, after the kids were taken to the hospital, blah, 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 I saw the one police officer by the garage, and I says, "Who found the kids?" And he says, "Those two guys did." I went, "Why didn't they look?" He says, "They just got here. They were hunting." And I said, so I went over and I asked them, I said, "Could I do an interview with you?" And they said, "We'd rather not." So I respected that.
Yeah. Well, you have
But
to.
the police officer said, and to this day I'm haunted by it, if only they'd have been here from the beginning, we would have got them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, come on.
And from that, though, appliances now,
Well, they were supposed to be already back then have the doors removed.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons the two fathers locked horns.
Yeah.
But why wasn't that door taken off?
I see.
And
So I
and
didn't
then-
realize that that it was supposed to be done back then.
Yeah,
even.
they started. I don't even. I checked one time, Cheryl, and I'm not going to say what year it was they started that, but it was before that event.
Okay.
2 weeks after that incident happened with those kids, 2 more kids disappeared. Guess where the first place everybody checked?
Yeah.
Every appliance in the neighborhood.
Sure.
But they were just the right size. And I mean, boy, I wish we had something I could. I mean, the unit was about this wide. So a washer dryer combination, it's pretty. And that door, I mean, I wish you could see the latches back then, because that thing slammed. The latch, it was like the old refrigerators. Remember, now we got
Yep.
all these magnetic things?
Yep.
Back
Yep.
then we had latches on the refrigerator doors.
Yeah.
Boy, did I just date myself.
It's okay. I'm there too.
Yeah.
Well, you wonder how kids fit into some of the areas that they do. I was living in West Texas when little Jessica McClure fell down the well.
Oh my God, yeah. I remember that, yeah.
and I was there when they brought her up that evening, and but 72 hours I think she was down there.
Yeah.
And I'm from here. When I think of a well
Yep.
in a yard, I think of like a water well.
Yeah.
The
old pump.
Yeah, and it's this little thing. Really.
a hole.
Yeah, that's in the ground. And when I saw it, I thought, how did a child fall down in this thing?
Well, you know how kids are. When
Yeah.
I was small, we would look for hiding places.
Yeah.
We'd play hide and go seek in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
and boys and girls, and we'd go hide, and we'd find some. I'll fit in there.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what prompted them to get in there. I have no clue. I wish I knew. As it
Strange.
turned out, the Steffens girl, Shanna, her aunt worked for us in the business office.
Oh.
I did not know that until the following Monday.
Oh my.
And I told Jan, I said, Jan, I'm so sorry. And I got the nicest letter from the parents, Rewards, October, it was in March. March, sometime in spring. A very nice letter and thanking me for how we handled it, which to me was my award.
Sure.
It was the parents.
Yeah, because especially after that, critic kind of
Yeah.
panned you the way he did,
Well,
and it was completely.
they're allowed to their opinion. It made me feel like a piece of what.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. When they're not there, I don't know why. And you did handle it, from the way it sounds, very well, very professionally, and very respectfully.
Well, the people that I gave talks to high school students, college students, parents, PTAs, and nobody ever barked at me saying you
Yeah.
sensationalistic SOB.
Yeah. We're down to about 15 minutes. Gosh,
wow.
so I know it's fast, isn't it? So many things that I want to cover, but
Well,
we
let's
just
do it.
don't have time. So you mentioned David Spanbauer earlier. So here's a serial killer, right from our own midst here in Oshkosh, and this, as you say in your book, innocence began to vanish in the early 1990s with several different incidents that happened.
Ronnie Eichstead was the first one. And I put in the book, she disappeared on Dead End Road, of all places. That's where her family lived.
Wow.
And I talked about Ed Shepard earlier from Fond du Lac County. I got a call from Ed 6 weeks after Ronnie disappeared. I mean, they scoured every inch of land in and around Ripon those first 3-4 weeks. I mean, there wasn't a day that went by that there wasn't crews everywhere looking. And then I got the call from Ed one morning at 6 a.m., no caller ID back then. And I'm going, who in the heck? I said, there must be an accident somewhere. They want me to go cover. Picked up the phone, it's Ed. He says, how fast can you get to Spring Green? I went, where?
Spring Green, way down in the Madison
Yes,
area.
South Iowa County. And I said, what's down there? He says, they found Ronnie's body.
Oh.
So we chartered a plane and went down there. And I saw her. And I can't get that out of my mind.
Yeah,
It's
sometimes you see things, and there are things that I've seen too that it kind of
it's not
shakes
good.
you.
It did. It tore me up. My son is the same age as Ronnie, same age as Cora. So was my boss. I lost it on the night of Cora Jones' funeral on air. The funeral was at 5 o'clock in Wapaka, and we parked probably 4 blocks away to be considerate. And I'm starting to report about the funeral for Cora. And again, I just lost it on air.
Yeah.
The emotion gets you, because I got to know Rick and Vicki, Cora's parents, Rick and Vicki Jones, really well. They're still good friends. And I knew what they were going through. And your heart it rips,
It aches for them. It just does.
She was visiting her grandma. And Mary and I got married in Little Hope, which is right in south. It's south of Wapaka on E. And just maybe a half a mile over, you're in rural. You've heard of rural insurance.
Mm-hmm,
Well, that's where the thing was. Cora's grandma lived on that road. She was visiting her grandma, and that's where Spanbauer kidnapped her from. So I had a little bit of a connection to that area, and then I met Rick and Vicki and got to know them really well. They were so kind in telling me, they took me into their confidence, and they're good people. All these people were good people.
Yeah.
And I've stayed in touch with most of these people over the years. Lori Deppes's mom, I'm still in touch with. Mary Wegner, and so on. I don't have enough of that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Lori Deppes is another one. I mean, now, and we should say that, David Spanbauer, he died in prison from heart failure.
Yep.
And
he was
a fitting.
Ready, finally, he was ready to, his attorney, I had been after him, Bob, to give me, I said, I want to do an interview with him. I want to see what makes him tick. Part of it was anger, part of it was just curiosity.
Yeah.
And at first he wanted to get paid for it. And I went, no, we don't do
Oh,
that.
yeah. Journalism, you can't do that.
Checkbook journalism. And Post Crescent was also after Spanbauer to do the same thing. And neither one of it, and we don't believe in that, nor did the Post Crescent, yay. So anyway, but all of a sudden I want to say 2002, I got a call and says, he might be willing to talk to you now. I went, really?
Spanbauer?
Yeah. A week later, he died. So I think he knew the end was coming and he wanted to spill his guts.
Yeah.
But boy, he played mind games with the cops and the FBI. They couldn't crack him.
Some of these diabolical people, they just are. There's nothing other than just pure evil.
Yep.
They're just
That's what Judge Georgian called Spanbauer.
Did he?
Pure evil.
Huh, yeah. Now, Lori Deppes, you had mentioned her, very strange case. Finishes her job, goes to her boyfriend's apartment, he sees her pull up or hears her pull up,
Heard her pull up.
And, she never comes into the apartment building.
Yep. Never saw her. Found a styrofoam coffee cup cup on top of her car.
I mean, where
did she
I
go?
often wonder, where do these people go?
Yep.
And now that goes back to
92.
That's 92,
Yep.
August of
And
92.
it's 30 years ago. I talked to Mary maybe 3 weeks ago because I sent her a copy of the book. The people that I wrote about, I sent them copies just as, you know what, you've been through this crap. I want to give you something to read. They've all been very gracious, very grateful. And I said to Mary, how are you handling it? She says, Jerry, I don't ever have a good night's sleep.
Yeah. Now that's Lori's mom?
Yep.
Okay.
And I won't say where she's living now. She's not living in the Fox Valley anymore. But we stay in touch.
That's good. Well, and it makes you wonder if someday she will just show up.
Oh, you wonder.
But I just don't know.
It's
almost like a big sinkhole opens up,
Yeah.
and some of these people just fall through it.
30 years.
Yeah.
Where's my daughter?
Yeah.
Lori she'd be 52.
Amazing.
Yep.
The other one that we have to just briefly touch on here before we completely run out of time. Gosh, there's so many. Father John Patrick Feeney. Your a devout Catholic. You were an altar boy once upon a
I
time.
was that close to becoming a priest.
Were you really?
Yes, I was.
Well,
but I like girls too much.
We're glad that you didn't.
Everybody says, why didn't you become a priest? I said, because I like girls. I'm going to admit it right up front. You know?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's we're all better for it that you didn't.
Well,
But now there's a man who that rattled not only this area, but he made national news.
yeah, well,
with
thank you, Boston Globe. They were the ones that really popped the lid on this priest abuse. And when the Globe, the movie Spotlight came out, 2015, won Academy Awards.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, that was
Spotlight.
You see that movie? That's a very well done. It's pretty authentic too about what all happened. And but when the Boston Globe started broadcasting, printing their stories about the abuse in that area, Vince Biskubic, who was then DA in Outagamie County, said, I wonder if we've got any cases here. Well, he uncovered the one with the Merrifield brothers. And that was about the time, Todd and Troy their parents were just being ostracized like nobody's business in Freedom. And during the trial in 2004, I was threatened by some of the people who, quote unquote, are good Catholics.
Yeah.
How dare you make fun and insult the Catholic Church over this? He's a slob.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but he's a slob. And myself, I'm Catholic. Biskubic, the DA, Catholic. Feeney's attorney, Jerry Boyle from Milwaukee, Catholic. We all had a job to do, and we all did our job.
Yeah.
And Todd and Troy, I stay in touch with them. Todd just recently remarried. He ended up getting divorced because he didn't tell his wife or his daughters. They didn't know nothing about it until this hit the fan in 2004.
Well, maybe they just didn't know how. And there's a certain amount of
there's an
shame,
embarrassment factor.
Yeah, shame, embarrassment.
Yeah.
But this man destroyed so many people's lives, and so
there's still some things going on with that one that angers me. The fact that the church yet has to apologize to the Merrifield brothers. Todd and Troy lost their dad earlier this year. Their mother, I won't say where she's living now, but it's not in Freedom. She's still in the area, but I will not disclose where she's living. But shame on the church. Come on. You did wrong, admit it.
Yeah.
You want me to confess when I sin.
Exactly.
What's
That's
wrong
an
with you?
excellent point.
I don't get that.
No.
I just don't. And that's I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done pontificating.
Well, no, but it is true. It is true.
Yeah.
It's the old "do as I say, not as I do,"
yeah, right.
and it's the same thing with the Boy Scouts.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's another situation that's very much like that. And, people are we tell our kids, well, I don't, I have just dogs, but,
They're kids.
society, they are. They're my fur children. But I don't have to send them off to camp anywhere.
Yeah.
So, but society tells its children, you can trust your Boy Scout troop leader or leaders. You can trust your priest. You can trust your pastor. And yet, in so many cases, you can't. And it's like the old saying, one bad apple spoils a whole bunch.
Well, and it's turning out now. It isn't just the Catholic Church that's got a problem with pastors abusing
That's
children.
why I said pastors,
Yeah,
because it's out there.
The Southern Baptist, they're going through their hand-wringing right now, and I'm whatever. You know what?
Yeah.
On the Boy Scout thing, I got to say one thing. EAA did them proud last week. The kids from Appleton that saved those families down in Missouri
Yes.
with a train wreck.
Yes.
They were guests of the EAA on Saturday night for the Saturday night air show. Way to go, boys! You did your scouts proud,
That's
and they
great.
needed some good publicity.
Yeah.
So
Well, let's before we finish on that, did that rattle your faith at all, Jerry?
oh God, yes. I guess what rattled me was that there were people in the courtroom, and there wasn't a lot, maybe half a dozen, who were giving me crap and giving the Merrifield brothers crap because they were saying bad things about the Catholic Church. I'm sorry, they were wrong.
Yep.
How, it's like there's things going on in national politics right now that think so-and-so can do no wrong. He did wrong.
Yeah, sure did.
Father Feeney was a cancer, and the church took its good-natured time in getting him out of the vestments.
Is he still alive?
95 years old,
95.
and he is. He's living down in Mississippi. That's the funny part of it. He's still alive. He was sentenced when he was 78.
Amazing.
And Judge Lipke said, I'm basically giving you a death sentence. Well, then they had to shorten the sentence up because of the rules that were in effect when the crimes happened. Son of a gun still walking around.
Yeah, well, not too far though, and probably not for too much longer. Yeah, it does
It's
make
funny,
me wonder though.
him and Paulus are both in the same neck of the woods.
I was just going to say that.
Paulus is in Alabama.
Yep.
Feeney's in Mississippi.
Former Winnebago County DA Joseph Paulus.
Yeah.
That's covered in this book also.
Yeah.
And boy, that shook this community to the core. Really,
Yeah,
I mean, who
it
would have known?
didn't happen here.
Yeah,
Then it did.
exactly. Great title for the book.
Yeah.
But, you referenced E.J. Jelinski, Ed Jelinski, and
Tommy
Tom
Shelkoff.
Shelkoff, and dear friends of mine, especially Tom. Boy, I heard some of those tapes. I think I heard most of those tapes.
Yeah.
There was stuff on there that I'm not a prude, but boy, it made my hair curl.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure, pick up the book and read it to find out about that Joe Paulus story. But yes, he was
He was a dandy.
he was a dandy. Yeah. Hollywood Joe. He thought of himself as being someone who had. Well, there was one movie, wasn't it, that was made about the
multiple personalities.
Yeah, and he envisioned himself as something wonderful.
Yeah.
We didn't even touch on EAA or anything. You're volunteering still with EAA,
Well,
right?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Last year was my last year. This year was my last year. I'm pretty sure this was my last year. I've had a very good relationship with the organization. I did a lot of good stories out there, made a lot of friends, a lot of special memories. But it's time for me to walk away. My stamina, I'm not a spring chicken. And I had a good time out there. And I trained a new guy this year. And I think Ryan will do well. Sure hope he does. But I'll go out there and visit, but I'm not going to do I'm pretty much done with that now. So.
Well, even as a reporter, those were long days.
Oh, yeah.
You started covering EAA well before the event even started. You covered it for a week or two afterwards, and now they're telling me I've only got a minute, so I better shut my mouth and move on. But it was such a pleasure to meet you. Our paths have probably crossed over the years, and we've never actually met.
Yeah.
It was a real joy.
Oh, thank you. I'm flattered you had me.
The book is just wonderful. Again, that doesn't happen here until it did. Plus some things about EAA, and we'll just let you read them when you pick up the book. So thank you so much for being here. And for all your years of service to this community.
Yeah, by the way, not to promote it, Cheryl, but that's only available on Amazon.
Yes, and we've been putting that up.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah, we've been
good,
putting
okay.
it up on
Thank
screen.
you.
So,
Yeah.
but thank you for everything that you've done. I think that you and some of the other old timers, if you will, who stuck around at a station for pretty much ever.
Yeah.
You set the standard pretty high.
Thank you.
Pretty high
That's a
for
nice
people
compliment.
today.
Thank you.
So that's going to do it for us. We will see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.